How does a musician who grew up in North Wales end up touring with Depeche Mode in stadiums all around the world? And how do they go on a journey from being into indie music, working in a record shop where they end up meeting people like Björk, to becoming one of the most revered artists of our generation? Well, in this conversation, I meet one of my absolute favourite artists, the electronic music pioneer Kelly Lee Owens. Drowning Sound has championed her for much of the last 25 years. Well, the years in which she's been active, which has been over a decade. And in that decade, she has crammed a lot in. She's made some extraordinary records. She's collaborated with some amazing people. And in the playlist which accompanies this podcast, which you can listen to with our partners, Cobuzz, find the link in the description, stick it on. There's some great stuff on there. We go through some of the best bits of her career and some of the artists we discuss in this episode, which does include me mispronouncing some Welsh, but it also includes Kelly Lee Owens talking so thoughtfully about grassroots music, about the joy of music, about a life lived in music, and some exciting things for the future. But to kick off, I started with a trivia question, and I'm sorry, Kelly, it was a bit of a silly one. First and foremost, I'm a big fan, and welcome to the Drowning Sound podcast.
Thank you.
I realised that it's 10 years next year since your very first EP, and we're doing a series of interviews because Drowning Sound just turned 25 with some of our favourite artists the last 25 years, and you were very much on that list.
Oh, thank you.
And so I thought I'd give you the choice in this interview. We'll do 3 parts. Do you want to start with the past, present, or future?
Oh, I think the past.
Cool. What links me, you, Iggy Pop, Ian Curtis, and Simpsons creator Matt Groening?
Wait, what? Oh my God. Am I actually supposed to answer this? Am I supposed to know?
I just thought you might know. So I'll tell you why.
Tell me.
We all worked in record shops.
Did we? Wow. I think what a place for an education in music.
Yeah.
But the Simpsons...
Yeah, I know. I was Googling and it was like he worked in a record shop.
That's so cool. I didn't know that. Thank you.
Which may be why the record shop guy is such a cool character in The Simpsons.
Okay, that makes more sense. Yeah, so
He's probably written himself in with that.
Yeah.
But the big thing that the more research I did of you, the more obvious it is how obsessed with music you are. And why, when you moved all the way to London, did you work in all the best record shops? And what kind of education did you get from doing that?
Well, it was interesting because, as you say, I've always loved music and been attracted to people who create it, and I wanted to always be around it in some way. And especially coming from a small village in North Wales, I wasn't exactly exposed to those types of scenes. But I was lucky to have Manchester quite close to me and Piccadilly Records. So just getting to see those types of communities. I think even the venues like Night and Day or the smaller venues where I think I was on the door IDing people, even though I was, I think, about 17 myself.
My first job in a club, I was 17.
There we go. I think all the best people are, you know. But I just felt as though I ended up going from an auxiliary nurse, actually, which was interesting because it was a paid wage and there were 12 weeks paid leave. So I took the opportunity with those 12 weeks to go down to London and help out at these record stores for free. And XL Records as well. I think I was pressing the CD single for the first XX single ever, and I was there when they finished their album, you know, things like that. And so I think just inserting myself again to be inspired around these people who were part of a community that I wanted to belong to. And I ended up helping out at Pure Groove, and they offered me a full-time job with a salary in 2009, which was pretty much a recession, just because I would just show up. And I think there's value in showing up and offering your services and that personable, very like human way of just being around and connecting with people. So it was from there that I felt like it was a springboard into the other places I ended up. And of course, I met Daniel Avery there. And for me, it's always feeling part of something bigger than yourself that I'm interested in, really.
And what do you think you've learned from, because I think from working in a record shop, I got a really different understanding of who loves music. Like, and I know that some of the record shops you worked in were pretty cool, so you probably weren't getting as many grands coming in singing "Hit Me Baby One More Time" like when I worked in a record shop. They were like,
where was yours?
This was in Weymouth in Dorset where I grew up.
Oh wow.
And it was this little like independent store, and we'd have like dance DJs from Ibiza come in, because in the winter they'd come DJ in Weymouth, and I'd do like 3 hours of just like playing records for people.
Wow.
And then they just all hang out at the counter. But then you'd also get like grannies come in and go, "I want the Hit Me Baby." Like they'd be like singing it, not knowing who the artist was or what the song was.
Music's music.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. I really miss the characters that I would meet in the record stores. There was one guy called Decca Dave, we would call him, who worked for Decca, I think in the 60s. And, I'd go, "Hi, Dave, how are you today?" And he'd be like, "All right, my sweet," I think it felt like he was from another era, another time. And he'd say, "Well, all my heroes are dead, and shortly I'll be joining them." And that was just a sort of average day, talking to Dave. But what he loved more than anything was music. And he would still collect those Decca CDs and records. And I think Decca Dave would be proud to know I ended up signing to Decca for publishing, Decca Universal. So I don't know, you meet amazing people. I met Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, individually, Nick Cave, Björk. But the beautiful thing about those spaces, and what's really important to always remember, is that these people are just music fans, and you're all on a level in that space. And that is one of the most beautiful and humbling things to remember. And like you say, it could be the sort of 70, 80-year-old woman who's looking for Britney Spears, or it could be the sort of super nerdy collector guys or whatever. But you're given an education, and you're actually forced to listen to music that you don't love yet. And I think that's the thing about music, is it finds you when you need it. Different phases in your life open different doors depending on what you've been through. And that's what I find fascinating about it,
And becoming a DJ, you've obviously acquired loads and loads of knowledge. Were there records and sounds and things that you picked up from working in the shops when someone put on something that's like, I remember the amount of music people would play and I'd be like, I just don't get it.
Yeah.
And then you'd be like, oh, okay, now I get it, because either music tastes have changed, or because I feel like I had such an education from working in a record shop. I almost feel like everyone in the music industry should work in a record shop for at least a month, and they should go on tour for at least 6 months.
Oh.
And then everyone would think completely differently about what the life of a musician is like.
Oh, the basics, totally. I think working opposite Fabric in 2009, 2010 with Daniel Avery, and being blessed to have free tickets to go there whenever I wanted, even though I was very much still an indie kid, was incredible. And going into places like that, being sort of positively overwhelmed is the only way I could describe it. Having I think it's a classic like floor that moves, right, and shakes, and ending up playing there years later. I think it was with John Hopkins and also with Leon Vinehall, and being part of an institution and feeling part again of something bigger than yourself. Also, I think I remember Björk coming in and asking for the techno section and just not quite getting it, even though I loved her music, and that was a beautiful amalgamation of so many influences seemingly. But yeah, I think it takes time and experiences, and one of them for me was being in the studio, seeing how analog synths worked, and seeing what really production was, that made me, I would say, honestly respect it. And from the respect came the obsession with playing with things that just feel so tangible. So yeah, a couple of different pointers, and obviously being around Daniel Avery and him asking me to come and record Your Own Logic was, I think, really, I've mentioned it before, but genuinely the most pivotal moment for me.
It's such an amazing record as well. So I walk into a record shop. What's one album from the last 25 years that more people need to hear?
I hope this was in the last 25 years. Maybe it wasn't. I'm going to say it anyway. But this Mortal Coil, It'll End in Tears. Do we know if that's in the last 25 years?
Don't know. I feel like it might be 80s.
Okay.
90s.
Yeah, true. Wait. Oh, yeah, wait. 25 years.
So it's since 2000. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
It's all right. You can come back to it if you don't.
No, I'm going to say Anything by the Knife.
Yeah.
Because I think in our world, we think of those people as being like quite big and everyone would know who they are, but they're so weird
Yeah.
and so avant-garde. And they changed the way that I thought about electronic music. It's super melodic, super strange, not strictly techno, strictly house. So they really opened up a lot for me. Maybe Silent Shout would be the one out of all of them that I would pick.
That's got all the bangers on it, hasn't it?
Yeah.
There was definitely something that shifted at that point in music, because I know that my music taste, I went from being very indie to being obsessed with the field, wanting to know everything that was on hyperdub, getting into compact.
Yeah.
It felt like something changed. And I think that some people say, oh, it's because we were much more online, that we wanted music that felt like the environments that we were in and the soundtracking the spaces we were in. And like, you think like what Trent Reznor did with the Social Network soundtrack, it was like really digital feeling. But actually a lot of the technology from the records that I think I ended up loving were almost all analog records that sound like the future in this like conflicting, confusing kind of way.
Yeah.
What do you think shifted for both music at that point and for you? Because I think going to clubs and experience the music is one thing, but it felt like something like really changed in like the culture.
Yeah, which is always super interesting. And I always think it's to do with like the psychology and the things that are happening of the times, as you say. There was a little bit, I'm going to call it more of an indie hedonism. I think it was a point where being independent as an artist, whether that's with guitars or synths, was possible to like really be successful. So people could be a lot more experimental and take more risks, which is something that I feel like is lacking a little bit at the moment. And I don't want to be ever just totally negative about anything, because I think every sort of musical phase that sort of the world goes through is interesting on and of itself and of the time. But it just felt like a little bit hedonistic. It felt like those sounds were on the edge. I remember Sound of Silver also was a life-changing record for me. And again, it could be an obvious thing, but as a little indie kid from a, Welsh village, to me, it was just mind-blowing. And it just felt important to take risks, and people seemingly made exactly what they wanted to make. So we were still on the cusp of it not being so influenced by social media and about, being viral in any sense. I don't think that was even really a thing then.
No, I think it was too hard to go viral. Like, end like 2009, 2010 type of time. Like there was some extraordinary records like Phoenix and M83 and like, it just really felt like something shifted. And then I discovered your music about 2014, 2015. Like listening to like John Talabot and and I think it was from your Jenny Val remix, because I was obsessed with is it the what's the one about banana skins, which is obviously a really saucy reference. Like, and I think amazing. And I just like, and I found that, and then I was like, you've not got anything else, I want to go deeper. And it just felt like every time I was like scrolling and refreshing, I was finding just people making gorgeous music with electronics.
I think it was a great time because, the first place I put out a track ever was SoundCloud. That was also a really interesting time. The music industry was changing so much that you were able to create your own rules. It wasn't just a solid structure anymore of record labels and publishing. I mean, honestly, I wasn't published until I think towards the end of In a Song. So a lot of my tracks are being used on the runway for like McQueen and Dior and all these things, but it was just coming from this very organic place of people. I think that discovery, which we often talk about now, is kind of lacking or missing or has changed, let's just say. But I put it out on SoundCloud, and I think it was Bill Ryder Jones from The Coral who, I'd met and was helping to give me advice. Just, he was like, don't be precious about this. Whatever it is, just it's important to get it out there. And I remember, typing away emails, sending them off to, Clash and other places, and he was like, to be like, hi, my name is Kelly and I was on the Daniel Avery record, and this is my foray into making my own
I should
tracks.
check. You
probably have an email somewhere. And I just that very DIY spirit. But I also pressed my own vinyl. So there's Kalo 01, Kalo 02 limited, that, I think on Discogs doing quite well now. I'm proud of that.
You wish you had a box of them.
I do. That's one thing that I was like, okay, I've definitely got enough here. But it was an exciting time because I spoke to someone at the vinyl factory and that DIY spirit, they were helping me out.
Yeah.
I hand delivered them to several record stores, and it felt really, really exciting. And I would still encourage people to do it, because I do feel like the personable aspect of things we are all craving on multiple levels, I will just say.
I think it's quite interesting to look back when I've been deep Googling before this interview of how much press coverage you had and how much human curation there was in amongst all of that. And obviously working a record shop is a form of human curation, what you put in the racks. And obviously being a DJ is almost the ultimate form of it. You are picking either in real time or with some prep, kind of like what's going on in that room and in that sound for those people in that place and that time. I'm just curious, you've obviously done a few more records in recent years, whether you've felt the difference of there being less humans and more automation to kind of the gap between you and your audience.
It's a tough one, because my job when I'm DJing, and it's the same when I'm live. I mean, my live show is very different, and I curate the whole thing. And I think whether it's live or DJ, there has to be a storytelling. There has to be an arc. And often people would say to me, you know, you have to bow a little bit to the audience and sort of work with them in that way. And I don't agree. I feel like I'm there to take you on a journey that you may not even know you need to go on. And it will either be for you in that moment or it won't. And I'm not saying I don't read in terms of, okay, this track, for example, has been going on this long and I feel like now is the time for a switch up. Yes, those subtle energetic shifts, of course. But in terms of like curation, I feel like it's my job to curate well and tell the story that I want to tell. And I think that's the beauty of also being an artist and a DJ, where you make your own music as you're sort of really used to storytelling. So in terms of the way I go about it, it hasn't really changed. But of course, we can't ignore the fact that playlists are huge, and it is a form of music discovery at the end of the day. And there's a balance to be had, of course, always about accepting where things are and then advocating for ways that things have been before that have worked. And I will say, it's like anything, the challenge of discovery. I don't want that to end. That part of being human, whether it's finishing a song and it's really sticky and you can't find the words, or, you know, that for me is the best bit about being human, is pushing through and things not coming to you so easily. And again, the physicality, and as you say, the community and being connected. For example, record stores. And then you'll discover things that you had no idea existed, had no idea you would love. There's something about that aspect that I don't think will ever go away. And perhaps we might even crave more so than ever. So it will be interesting to see how things develop in that way.
Whereabouts are you finding stuff for your sets? Are you the person that goes in and chats to the people in the record shop?
Oh yeah. I'll go into Funnooker and I'll just be like, what's good?
Yeah.
And then, you know, the beauty of it is they will give you a pile of music. And of course, like when you're an artist, they sort of know what you might like. Thank you. Great. Amazing. And then you listen. And even when I was working in a record store, people say, what do you think's good? And I'd be like, I can only give you 50% here. I'll give you what I think is good, but your taste, your lived experience, what resonates with you literally should be different than what I like. And I will say I've never been personally easily influenced in that way. I don't really follow the crowd. And I know it's kind of like sometimes feels a bit lame. Oh, I'm like, you know, don't follow the crowd. I'm this. But I just have my own mind and my own taste. And I think that's the best thing about being who you are.
And it's also, you're a different person from day to day and week to week and hour to hour. It's like,
depending if I had a coffee or not this morning, you know, before I got here, you know, there's many things.
It's like sometimes what you're craving is not always the thing that you reach for as well. And like, I remember just a few times being so surprised by like, I'd be like, okay, I'm just going to open up a certain publication. I'm going to open up Resident Advisor and I'm just going to scroll until I see a name that sounds interesting that I've never heard of, and just listen.
Or artwork.
Yeah. Or artwork.
That's why artwork's so important. I would be staring at records all day long, and I would always find it interesting what, you know, I gravitated towards. And for me, interestingly, there was always this element of simplicity for the most part, where I thought about what I would like to create. But then I think about, you know, stuff like Nick Drake, like there is simplicity and stuff, but it's multi-layered. For example, some of the, you know, Pink Moon or Brighter Later, which is bonkers in the best way ever. But I will say I get sent a lot of DJ promo stuff. And just from the artwork, it will determine whether I listen or not. It's so interesting what that is about. I can't really answer that question, but there's something there.
It was interesting when we went to the CDR era, the amount of promos that came in just like looked bad. And like, so you didn't really have a filter of the imagery because people would just stick a CDR in a paper case.
Just do anything.
And it was like, our post sack was awful. But it was like, I want to know what it looks and feels. I want your world building. And
well, that's where I think limitation is important.
Yeah.
Hi there, it's Emma here. I'm gate crashing the podcast to quickly tell you about the Drowned in Sound newsletter. Every Wednesday, I invite myself into your inbox, with permission, of course, to share opinion writing and resources, tell you about cool things that you should be involved in within the world of music, activism, etc. I also bring track of the week and a little bit of hopeful news for you, because we all know that the news cycle can be grim at the best of times. Drowned in Sound newsletter every Wednesday in your inbox. Sign up now.
I think it's really hard when you can kind of do anything. Some of the best stuff I've created has been limited in terms of whether it's money or synths or it's just like that's the place where imagination grows. And I think that was what the Dream State was a nod to. Was, you know, I was reading recently about time and how, yes, as you get older, time moves more quickly, and that's the way that the brain processes things, which is much faster. But they did a survey recently and it was talking about how all different ages were experiencing time very, very quickly. And that's because when we're mindlessly scrolling or basically the space and the time isn't being filled with imagination, time to dream, time expands in proportion to processing of thoughts. And I just always will be an advocate for the daydreamer and the dreamer. And I think we're all feeling that at the moment. But yeah, I just found that really interesting.
Definitely. I feel like we could now just do an hour on that, and I won't.
But another time.
But I think also time and space are crucial, and I'd written down a question that was relevant to that. So David Byrne wrote about the way that architecture changes the music, the sounds in the room can affect the types of music people make for the room. How has performing those huge shows of Depeche Mode sort of changed your sonic horizons of like how big the room is?
Firstly, just to say, David Byrne, as with many people, changed a lot for me, and I owe him so much because Stop Making Sense was one of the first records I ever bought. And Talking Heads, you know, I used to play bass in a band, and Tina Weymouth, my first bass was called Tina, after Tina Weymouth. His mind has changed my mind in so many ways. So just shout out to David Byrne, first and foremost.
You read the book that I'm talking about?
I have read the book because I was trying to get into music. I've read several of his books because there was no roadmap. And especially as a working class artist, it was like, how do I go about this, you know? But that is why having community is important, because you have to ask the questions and there are people there to help and support you along the way. But of course, Depeche Mode, I think the lowest number of people I played in front of was around 20,000 a night, and the maximum 75,000 times 3 in 1 week in Mexico, which, I mean, the fans in Mexico are unbelievable.
Yeah. I've only been to one festival in Mexico, and it was just such a vibe. The whole, like, I don't know if they do it at arena shows, but at the festival I went to, they just walk through the crowd with beer. You just order, it's like you can be in the second row of a show and they will walk around with like trolley service of beer on their head.
All about having a good time. They are obsessed with music. They're obsessed with having the best time ever. They know how to live life really well. So I was very lucky I could go there with Depeche, but I felt so embraced in that space. Strangely, I thrive the bigger the audience. I had
well, they almost become dehumanized, don't they, at that scale? Like if you played for like 4 or 5 people, it would feel quite weirdly intimate. That's what some people have told me anyway. They feel like it's not as dehumanized, but it's not as like it's not as nerve-wracking as being in a smaller room with where you can see people?
I think seeing people's faces definitely is always something. But I feel differently. I when I step on a stage with lots of people, I feel challenged to keep it so human and reach the back of that room. And I actually had Daniel Miller, who signed Depeche Mode, obviously, and him and I became friends. And he said to me, I just wanted to say I've seen a lot of support acts over the years, and that was one of the best I've ever seen. So congratulations. He said, you reached the back of that room, and it was just me on stage, you know? And so he helped to give me some confidence that I could fill that space. But I'd say the main thing is thinking about my production value. After that tour, I scrapped everything and I went back to the drawing room, and I made sure that everything that I did was about reaching as many people as possible. Also, my voice changed. So the way that my voice is now in comparison even to just 3 years ago is unreal. I decided to take singing lessons for the first time to make sure I was breathing properly and all these things. But basically, I feel like everything in me expanded for the better. And the confidence that Depeche Mode gave me just by asking me to be a part of their world was, I'll just never forget that. And I'm so thankful for it.
It's such an extraordinary band as well.
Yeah.
Right. Let's jump to the present. I think we'll do it chronological order.
Wait, that was just the past?
I mean, that was sort of the present anyway.
No, I love this. Obsessed.
So you recently played a show, and I'm going to try and pronounce it in Nayad Owen.
Nayad Ogwen.
Ogwen.
Nayad Ogwen. I'm saying that again closer into the mic so you can hear me.
You said it was really important to do community shows kind of from where you're from. What was special about that show, and how did it feel?
It's not often I feel like I can't speak. But let's just say the night before I played the Warehouse Project, which is iconic, and every single room is curated beautifully. I got to play the Stone Roses. It was such a special moment. But I will say the next day, playing in Bethesda to 200 people, I will never forget that show as long as I live. They took no moment for granted. I had a 10-year-old on one side of the DJ booth. I'm not kidding. And a 70-year-old, something-year-old on the other side. Yeah. When we talk about community, like this guy who's in his 70s, he was at the raves in the quarries in the 90s. Yeah. He's seen it all. This 10-year-old guy was a DJ, inspired by what I do. Wow. I couldn't believe it. My mum was there, Girls Love Techno t-shirt. It was one of the most incredible atmospheres. And I played there a year earlier with Caribou, which is really what inspired it. And they went all out with the production for us. And I would love to do something more regularly there because that's what's needed. And nobody really comes to North Wales because Manchester or Liverpool is maybe an hour or so away. And so I have to put my money where my mouth is and just show up and let people know that they matter. And I think it's inspired me to maybe do sort of smaller venues like that in places that people wouldn't normally go to. And I might work with the Music Venue Trust to figure out where those places are because it genuinely was one of the best nights I've ever played at.
I think like I grew up in a seaside town where the last transport was like 8 o'clock. Yeah. So you couldn't go to stuff.
Yeah.
And you feel quite cut off. And like we now live in such a like globalized world, but people are still kind of like, they can't just go to a show in Manchester. Yep. They can't just pop to Liverpool.
No, and it's also expensive as well. So I reduced the tickets. I think tickets were like £12 or something. Yeah. I'm not making money, but that's not the point of that particular show.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think that the levels of community that we need and what scenes need, and like, I guess almost like to radicalize people as music fans like we are, to become obsessed with music. Like,
and you
that
can't be what you can't
like,
see.
Yeah.
So someone from like where you're from or where I'm from, you know, people come up to me, for example, saying, it's really inspiring what you're doing. It's making me feel like I could do it. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
And that talent that would otherwise just be dormant, it needs to be encouraged. It needs to be found. You have to kind of go to them, right? That's my way of thinking. And obviously we know there's a huge issue at the moment in terms of working class artists and that percentage like going down year after
even
year
worse
after
in
year.
journalism.
Is it really?
Yeah. It's like, I when I was at the BBC, less than 20% of people from working class background.
Wow.
It's like the 80% like dominance of middle and upper classes
80%.
in almost all the creative industries. It's just like, and it's like the balancing that like music venues trust have pushed the government to bring that levy in to put more money into grassroots music and to venues and to artists. And it just feels so crucial to have like, how else are we going to have music scenes that thrive and that people
Totally. Think about Oasis this year. What that band means to people is because actually the majority of the people that listen to them are kind of the majority of the people in the UK actually working to middle class people who can really relate and resonate with the stories and the places that artists like that come from. It's so fundamental. And you know, the stories people have to tell are so fascinating. And I'm really passionate about trying to help in any way I can to let people know where I've come from, so that if people are from a small place, that they feel too that they can find a way through. But like you say, it's bigger than that. It's about the structures that are in place to actually help people figure out a pathway forward in those spaces.
This episode of the Drown in Sound podcast is presented in partnership with Qobuz, the platform that pays artists 4 times more than the industry standard, that has high quality audio, that has human curation, which as a human curator is something that I truly value over the kind of algo slop that you get on some platforms. You can really hear the difference. I know lots of places talk about the audio qualities, and as soon as I moved across, it sort of felt like I was rediscovering music, which is one of the platform's slogans. If you're worried about your playlists, you can use Soundiz. It's a really good tool that's part of the sign-up process when you join Qobuz. It just transfers everything across. If you'd like a free trial of this platform that's independently owned and made for music enthusiasts, head to drownedinsound.org/playlists, where you can hear not only our playlists, but get a free trial. You can also find these details in the show notes to this episode. And now back to this episode of the Drown in Sound podcast, brought to you in partnership with Qobuz. So if I was to give you £500 million right now, how would you spend it to improve clubbing and like music scenes? It doesn't have to be on bricks and mortar. You can spend it however you like.
Well, I actually wrote down a few ways recently. Is it okay if I get my phone out? Because I felt like this is quite important. 1 second. My notes app. There are just so many ways, and it's a huge question, I suppose. But
I quite like how, because the question's so big, it's not like if you had £1 million, it's 500 million. It's so big.
I know. I haven't actually broken it down into,
units. You don't have to.
No.
It's more of a big question, more of a big thinking question. Yes. I will send this to Carol Vorderman and get to check your maths.
My God. The Welsh icon that Carol Vorderman is. I wrote down some general ideas, and this is, I guess, inspired by the Music Venue Trust, who do the most amazing work in making sure that venues survive and that up-and-coming artists can thrive ultimately. One of the things I put down as the first thing was cultural leases. If you don't have the smaller spaces protected with certain leases from closure, I mean, we know this is a huge problem. We know in London, I mean, if Fabric can be threatened, an institution like that in central London, what hope do smaller venues have?
Did that really light a fire in you, the threat of Fabric? I heard you talk about it a few times, and it seems like if it had been the Royal Ballet or Royal Festival Hall, I think culturally people would have felt different. But Fabric means so much to so many people, and it seemed to me like a lot of the times when I've heard you talking about the importance of grassroots culture and music, like that seemed like a really big moment for people. So I think you just assume it's an institution, it's always going to be there.
Oh, it was shocking is the word. And even I therefore looked at my own complacency at that point to be like, wait a minute. Fabric to me felt like a forever thing, and if they can almost be shut down, where does that leave everyone else? So it really, really, I would say, woke me up and made me think about what I could do. So it was a pivotal moment. Maybe it was supposed to happen to wake us all up and have us think a bit further than those spaces aren't going to exist if we don't fight for them ultimately. So
you would have protected the lease of a place like Fabric.
Cultural leases. I mean, that's just one place, but I think actually, all of it's smaller than that as well.
It's an example.
It's an example of one place that, that kind of thing has helped something survive. But we need to do that with small venues. So I can mention like Neath Ogwen and lots of other venues around the UK. If you have those cultural leases. And I did go on the BBC talking about when the pandemic happened and Brexit, that it was this toxic concoction of ultimately me having to find out about the numbers. So I didn't even realize myself that music was one of the biggest exports of the UK.
Yeah.
We do not export that much, and music is one of them. And so you would think that the government were therefore, even if they just understand numbers and they don't care culturally what it means, that they would want to protect that. People often speak about the glory days. Well, I do believe that can be something that we come back to where, artistry, artists and people of the country can be proud of who we are and what we export and what we're really good at. So I think there's so much talent here. So cultural leases. This isn't a fully formed idea, but I put here sort of X amount going towards venues so that artists can be paid properly.
Yeah. I
have found, quite honestly, that the costs for people I work with, quite rightly, have gone up, in terms of wages because it's cost of living crisis. It's so difficult. Yeah. However, my offers have remained the same.
Or gone down slightly.
Slightly.
Which is not to do with your scale, because
no.
I work with the Anchoress and Catherine's gone out and done stuff, and it's like, you get the offer in, it's like, okay, that's about the same as last time, but the price of the Premier Inn, for instance, has gone from 50 quid to 140 quid, and you've got to put 6 people up for the night. And it's
absolutely
all of these costs people don't understand from the outside.
No, and that's why it's really difficult, because I understand both sides. When somebody who doesn't have much money can't afford to come to a show, you don't want to price people out. However, I'm at the point as an artist, for an example, where I'm sort of on a cusp where I'm not a small artist. I'm sort of that medium pivotal point where I've put so much money up front into greater production value so that I can give people the best experience. And, when I first moved here in 2009 to London, it felt like there was a trajectory, right? You put this in, you get this out. And so that's an incentive to just really keep going. However, right now that's on pause. And so I wanted to suggest, I suppose, X amount going to venues to sort of cover that difference so that maybe ticket prices can be lowered, but the fees can sort of rise in the way that they're supposed to. So that was another idea. Also, and I don't think this is about spending money, but we need a bilateral agreement with the EU and beyond when it comes to traveling and working and exporting and importing music. This is something that will benefit both sides. As I say, bilateral agreement. This should be worldwide. This should be America. This should be everywhere. It's people just cutting off the heart of their own cultures by not embracing bilateral agreements. I have heard this government in the UK talking more so about that at this point, which is encouraging, but we've already lost so many artists in that interim period between sort of, Brexit and now. So
it's also the smaller artists that can't afford to come here. We're missing out on the cultural diversity of someone that maybe coming from France that might play Cafe Otto.
Exactly.
And it's just not good. It's going to be too expensive for them to do it because of all of the nonsense.
Yes.
Anything else? I realized
back to my list.
Yeah.
This is something that the Music Venue Trust is already doing, but continued support of the legal support around venues. So facing struggles of eviction, etc. That's part of that cultural lease, I think. But I just want to drive that home, how important that is, because you do lose your fabrics without that, and that costs money with legal teams. So money being fed into those spaces continually is really important. I've also got here cultural grants that are means tested for working class artists to be
100%.
taught music, writing and production. So that pathway I'm talking about, that like, unless you're searching out for it and inserting yourself into places, is really hard to see. So money invested, in schools, but beyond schools as well, outside of that, where people can go to learn production, writing, and be given help in finding a clear pathway into, just the musical world that isn't just classical. That's important too. But I think we've understood, for example, how important integral electronic music is right now, and the access to I don't know, things like Logic and Ableton and software. So I'd love to see that.
I was in an event in Manchester the day after you did Warehouse Project, and they had Ableton workshops for people where they went in and recorded the sounds of the frogs in Manchester Museum.
Oh my God.
Natural History Museum.
That is right up my street.
And people who'd never made music before had little Ableton samplers, and they were learning. Do you know Hanako Omori?
No.
She does the beats for K Tempest and people. Her music's beautiful. You'd love her music,
amazing.
I think. And she was in there doing these masterclasses with people that had never made music before, with frog sounds and things. To me, like, that was like a small thing they were doing. It's like this climate and music event at Manchester Museum. It was really cool.
So cool. That's exactly it.
Because also, like, you can't subsidize tickets. Like, we talk about dynamic ticket pricing, but if you could means test tickets, like, we looked into this with Charlotte Church's Late Night Pop Dungeon tour. We were like, can we do a ticket that if you are going to a food bank, you can get for $5? Or like, if there's a way in which we could make, because we wanted to push the ticket price a little bit, because I don't know if you've seen Late Night Pop Dungeon, but there were like 9 people in the band.
Wow.
And that was like, there wasn't an easy way of doing it. You couldn't just click a button on the ticketing website and make tickets available. And I've seen some really cool collectives in London trying to do like, just send us an email if you're not doing, like, we did it with the Anchor Estates.
Wow.
We just did a like, DM us if you're not able to afford the ticket price, and we'll send you a private link to a cheaper ticket.
That's so cool. And also I mentioned schools because I feel like that's the sort of breeding ground where this sort of talent is there ready to sort of bubble up. And, people tend to know a bit more information in schools. And that would be a great place if schools could work in collaboration with government and music venue trust and other things like that. That would be a great place to start even, don't let it get to where someone maybe has to just obviously get a job where, I worked until I was, I don't know, what would I have been, like late 20s, like full time. I'm not saying that's not the right thing to do, but before people, I would say, get trapped into just surviving, having to get a job that doesn't give them the time or the energy to create. Yeah. I think like school is a great place to perhaps start that journey, really.
So I'm going to skip about 30 different questions and jump into the future. And this might not sound too much like the future, but I know you've talked a lot about sound baths in the past. And I'm really curious about your resilience and anything like music obviously is such a source for you in sound. Like, what would you recommend someone that's kind of sound bath curious, or kind of like thinking about how they can use music as part of a kind of like way in which of just giving themselves that kind of ongoing resilience?
It works in so many ways, doesn't it, music? If you're feeling low, for example, sometimes listening to a really sad song can give you the catharsis and the emotional space to actually hold you in releasing that emotion. Sometimes it's the opposite that's needed, where you're snapped out of it somehow and you end up dancing or crying in the club, maybe both things. So there's that. And there's also things like, I think one of the things I discovered quite a few years ago now was this thing called solfeggio frequencies. So it's a specific group of frequencies that are supposed to be related to individual parts of the body in resonance. And I think that's what opened me up to in the past, like the gong sound baths, and how ultimately everything is vibration. So, the molecules in our body, of course, like it's about releasing emotions, really. It's for me, it's like psychosomatic. And the somatic healing is something that probably the world is just sort of starting to understand how is so important.
Yeah,
I do several things. So whether it's massage, listening to music, there's talking therapy. There's lots of different ways of going about it. But I think music will always be a fundamental access point that's really immediate. So yeah, certain frequencies, or of course certain songs that do what they need to do.
Do you think that your DJ sets, you bring an element of that like healing energy into the tunes?
I try to. And I try to create a lot of sort of like euphoric moments. I feel I was looking at videos from the Warehouse Project the other day, and I have someone on the road with me capturing everything. So I get to see the night back in a way that I can never when I'm playing. And it's those like the builds, which is why I created my new track, Ascend, on the new EP, because it's the rising up of a moment where people, they feel like they're floating. You can see them suspended in something. They're trying to, I suppose, transcend where they are in the most positive sense. So those moments I try to give people for as long as possible, as often as possible, because that's where I feel you give people an opportunity to just feel free and unburdened from the everyday, which is really difficult for a lot of people at the moment. Also, every DJ set, depending on which city I am, I'm bringing my sort of indie roots back in. So the catharsis of, for example, in Bristol playing, you know, Massive Attack, Teardrop, and again, I didn't see this at the time, but my videographer captured people hugging in a round in the club and swaying and crying. And I was like, I was so moved by it. Or the Stone Roses, or the Cocteau Twins in Edinburgh, who are one of my favorite bands. It just, there are so many ways of going about it. And I'm so glad that those moments have really resonated with people. And actually they've gone viral in different platforms and what I'm doing, just because I think that bringing that into the club, I've never been someone who's separate from one or the other. Yeah. They're a huge part of me, all of that, the independent scene.
New Order talked about how the Hacienda changed the way they thought about writing their own music. Do you think going forwards, like obviously this new EP is banging and it's not like you haven't made stuff that's felt like that before, but do you think that some of those experiences you've been having in clubs recently, do you think that might be changing where you go next with your own music?
I think it can't help but influence what you create, having spent many years sort of learning the craft, especially of DJing. I struggle to call myself a DJ. Everyone else calls me a DJ. I still feel like I'm such a learner and such a beginner because I respect it so much.
So you're a selector and a mixer?
Maybe. Yeah. And everyone's like, but you're a DJ when you're DJing, right? I'm like, I guess so.
It's like when people say they're an aspiring writer and I'm like, do you write? Then you're a writer.
Right.
You might not be very, like, you might not feel like you're like Hemingway, but you're still a writer because you do the act of writing.
I mean, I remember this.
So
this
you do
reminds
the
me.
act of DJing, which makes you a DJ.
That is true. I think it's because maybe that's, and this is an interesting point, but my working class background, I struggle to even call myself an artist for a long time because it just felt so this or that and devoid of reality in a sense of where I came from. So yeah, I don't know what that's about, but
I mean, would you say I was a DJ when I worked in a club and they only had 2 CD players and a crossfader, and I had to serve behind the bar at the same time whilst keeping a dance floor of 200 people dancing all night?
Yes, if you have to keep people dancing, you're a DJ, whether it's, I don't know, at your house or in a bar, I'd say yes. And maybe I should give myself a break. Maybe I can finally say I'm a DJ.
I always struggled to say that I was a DJ because I literally would be pouring a pint and crossfading.
Wow, I mean,
which was a skill that I learned, and they had no till that added up, so I had to do the maths in my head for the till.
Okay, that's where I would be out.
I was
Me
literally,
and maths, like, no.
If anyone ordered more than 2 drinks, I was like, can someone else do this?
That would make you a better DJ than me, I would say. I think you should give yourself a lot of credit there.
So one last question for you. You've talked a few times about casting spells into the future. Drown in Sound's turned 25 and we've been asking everyone what they think music would be like in 2050. You can do both dystopian and utopian version, or just like however you think it would be.
I'm an optimist. If you don't have hope, then things die. So I really do believe that by 2050, we will have placed the value back on artistry, and by that time really understood that human connection is everything, and the physicality of being in a space sharing sound with other people is the best thing about being human, or one of the best things. So I do feel like by 2050 we'll have got our shit together and we will have realized how important this is for all of us on so many different levels, whether you're the artist or you're the music fan or both. I have high hopes, and I think it will especially in the UK, continue to be one of the biggest exports because the government are going to make sure that things are protected and that things are valued. And I do feel we'll have more voices from the working class spheres coming through, and I look forward to hearing those stories ultimately. So I have no negative things to say, and this is because words cast spells, spelling spells. So I'm speaking positive things into existence.
Even just saying it can make it happen.
Yes.
As Kate Bush once said. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I had a billion other questions here. Well, that was my conversation with Kelly Lee Owens. And as I said towards the end there, I did have a lot more questions that I could have asked. So hopefully I'll get around to at some point, because there is bound to be some more music from Kelly Lee Owens at some point, and I can't wait for that. But for now, you can hear a playlist of songs by Kelly Lee Owens, but also by lots of the artists we discussed in that episode, like LCD Sound System, The Knife. I've included David Byrne's new cover of Olivia Rodrigo. I can get my words out. And yeah, some Depeche Mode, obviously. Some Daniel Avery, who's one of her collaborators. And Kelly appears on that track, Drone Logic. Yeah, there's all sorts. There's a few remixes on there. There's Charlie XCX and George from 1975. George released Kelly's most recent EP on his label. So there's one of their remixes they did together of Caroline Polachek's Welcome to My Island, with some wonderfully saucy lyrics from Charlie. What else should I say? Well, yeah, if you head to our partners, Cobuzz, the link's in the description to the playlist. If you go to drownandsound.org/playlists, you can find all of those tracks and playlists that accompany every episode of this podcast. What are my main takeaways from the episode? Well, I think how Kelly wants to spend the huge sums of money which Spotify may or may not have spent on Joe Rogan and the CEO spent on AI war drones. That's why I asked that question. I often just think all this money that could have gone back into music and instead has gone elsewhere. Yeah, I think her ideas were really smart, really giving me a lot to think about in terms of different ways in which the industry can do lots of the things it's already doing and do them better, and do some new things that it's not already doing. I think that there was a few other things I was thinking about during that conversation, with how important human curation is and how working in a record shop, I always knew it did something to me, but I never really thought in the way that Kelly did, and how similar it is to DJing, and how essentially when I'm posting about music online, it's a lot of the same skills and a lot of the same thinking about who those people are on the other side of the counter, or looking through the racks and all those kinds of things, where when you work in a shop, they're some of the fun bits that you get to be part of. I am going to leave it there because this was a longish chat, and I'm sure your ears are ready to go listen to some music. And I think that in that episode, there's probably a whole pile of records for you to go dig into. So I've been Sean Adams. This has been the Drown in Sound podcast. Thank you to JJ Ehringer for filming this episode for YouTube. If you're listening to this episode, you can find some clips from it on Drown in Sound social channels. You can share those. That would be great, because word of mouth is how these podcasts spread. Thank you for Josh Craggs for editing this episode, and thank you for you being you. I will see you next time. Bye for now.